Every morning, the team at the Exchange meets to talk over the top stories of the day. Here's a look at what we think makes the cut.
In shocking news, Canadians don't like their cell phone bills.
No, it's
No. The report says that the complaints are going down, and then Open Media comes out and says, whoa, 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 whoa. Hang on a sec.
How about that battery? It would double to triple the range of electric car. This is the holy grail.
For the first time in 7 years, the number of complaints about Canadian telecom services declined. Overall, complaints filed with the federal watchdog with the catchy title, the Commissioner for Complaints for Telecommunications Services, dropped by 17%. Complaints over misleading contracts did rise, up 75%. The watchdog is cautiously optimistic the industry is becoming more customer-focused. It stresses there's a lot of work left to do when it comes to billing.
Some of the older providers have legacy systems that don't generate clear bills, and certainly the clarity of the bills is often a problem. You know, we look at billing complaints every day, and sometimes we'll sit around a table and look at a bill and none of us can figure out what the bill is intended to tell the customer.
Last December, Canada's telecom regulator introduced new rules for service providers to follow and gave consumers new rights. The wireless code allows consumers to cancel contracts after 2 years. It forces providers to cap extra data and roaming charges, unlock phones after 90 days, and provide contracts that are easier to understand. In the meeting, the team talked about whether those changes have had an effect.
The one thing that's skyrocketing is these complaints about misleading contracts. But this whole wireless code was supposed to be like specifically targeting people who don't know what they're signing up for, and you get something different. And that's up 75% in a like shrinking pie. That's, well, impressive is the wrong word, but it's sort of telling.
Do you think that the moves last year inspired people to make those complaints about their contracts being misleading? It sort of opens up that possibility that, you know what, actually maybe they have been charging me for something I shouldn't have been paying for.
I really wonder how much of that is actually people sign up for their price, $60 for 3 services or whatever, and never actually read what it was they were signing up for. Whose fault is that?
I wondered if we're just getting tired of complaining.
Meanwhile, the electric car industry is getting charged up over some promised technology. Solid Energy's new battery can store twice as much energy as existing ones. It's expected to triple the driving range of an electric car, and it's 20% cheaper. The developers think cost is key, saying we've got to get a car on the showroom floor for $30,000, not $130,000, and the big piece is the battery. He also thinks the battery could be transformational for the industry, and an automotive researcher agrees, calling the battery game-changing. That transformation is definitely a couple of years away, though. The battery is expected to be available for cars in 2016. The team talked about how the battle for the best battery is heating up.
There are all these different tracks happening on the battery file. There are people that are making these batteries that can charge super fast. There are other people that are extending the range. There are other people that are dropping the cost.
And the weight.
And the weight, somebody has to essentially either crack the nut of one of them or figure a way to combine all 4 or 5.
See, the issue isn't whether or not the technology is coming then, it's who is going to own it. As everyone has their electric cars, and the one company that has an electric car that goes 3 times as far charges in half the time or a tenth of the time, and there's one barrier left, right? And that's the frequency of charging stations.
Tesla's already doing stuff like building the gigafactory for the batteries. It's already coming out in 2017 with a $30,000 Tesla. So there is competition on that front.
Meanwhile, the former CEO of BC Hydro is speaking out against the National Energy Board. Mark Aleeson acted as an expert intervener in NEB hearings examining Kinder Morgan's proposed Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. Aleeson sent a letter to the board withdrawing from the role. He called the hearings process a sham and claimed it would be a waste of his time and effort to continue. He wrote, "The unwillingness of Trans Mountain to address most of my questions and the board's almost complete endorsement of Trans Mountain's decision has exposed this process as deceptive and misleading. This so-called public hearing process has become a farce." And he claims that about 2,000 questions from interveners weren't answered, so the interveners then asked the NEB to step in and put the pressure on. Apparently, the NEB made the company answer 5% of the questions. The rest were rejected. It all leads to new questions about the National Energy Board's review process, including the role some recent changes may have made here. Greg McDade is a managing partner of the law firm Ratcliffe & Company. He's representing the city of Burnaby, British Columbia in the NEB's review of the Kinder Morgan project. Great to have you with us.
Good afternoon.
Well, so I want to start as somebody who has been at the table with whether you agree with this characterization. Is there something flawed in the process that's going on with this review?
Well, it's strong language, but I'd have to say we do think the process is seriously flawed. There's here in the West Coast, there's a rising concern about the credibility of the NEB and really the legitimacy of this whole process.
So when we talk about recent changes and how that may have affected this, we're talking obviously in part about the federal government's decision to fast track some of the review processes around this stuff. Do you think that plays a role? Can we draw that connection?
I think we can. There's really two problems. One is when the federal government really eliminated most of the environmental rules in the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, and then when they fast-tracked the process, what happened was the National Energy Board became the sole determinator of environmental issues instead of their real mandate, which is energy. And that's led to, and the fast-tracking of the process means that the NEB decided to get rid of the public hearing part of the public hearing. So unlike every other major project where there's been hearings with evidence and cross-examination, here the NEB said they would forego all of that public process in the urge to get to a decision. And so that's led to a great deal of dissatisfaction.
Well, and let's get specific here. 2,000 questions being put to Kinder Morgan. It sounds like an awful lot, and almost one wonders whether you can't then make the case that these processes really are too cumbersome, that it's too much to ask for a company to answer 2,000 different questions. Is there an argument to be made there?
Well, this is the first hearing in which a major project has had to deal with written questions as opposed to cross-examination. You know, the Enbridge pipeline went through 90-some days of public hearing where people asked their questions in cross-examination. Here, the NEB said, no, you have to ask your questions in writing. But when people tried to do that, they found that Trans Mountain didn't answer the questions, and the National Energy Board said that was okay. So we really have no real answers at all. The process is just not working.
And so when you say that the review control process is in the hands of the NEB, why is that not okay? Why can we not trust that body to do a good, thorough review of the environmental implications here?
Well, you know, the NEB is fairly respected in terms of its mandate to decide energy questions. So when it's dealing in its core jurisdiction of deciding questions between oil companies and pipelines about pricing, it's actually quite good. But having been given this environmental responsibility and then a responsibility to decide these large public interest questions, it just seems that it's out of their league. It's beyond their competence. People on the West Coast are wondering, how do 3 people in Calgary, who mostly side with oil companies, decide the fate of cities like Burnaby and Vancouver and Burrard Inlet? So there's a real credibility gap here.
So you are representing as an intervener the city of Burnaby. What happens if that city and others don't feel as though their interests have been met and an approval is granted?
Well, I think it's time for a national debate, really, as to whether in the 21st century we should be putting pipelines through the most congested part of major metropolitan areas without any of the municipal or provincial laws applying. This company is really acting like they're above the law.
In what ways are they doing that?
Well, when they decided they wanted to do some studies, not just build a pipeline, but some studies through the Burnaby Mountain Conservation Area, which is a major park in Burnaby, they simply went in and cut the trees and destroyed the park. And the NEB said that Burnaby had no power to enforce its bylaws in that area. So the company went to the NEB and asked for immunity from Burnaby's laws, and surprisingly, they got it. First time in Canadian history that's happened. But when you have a powerful body like the NEB that says it has the power to overrule municipalities and provinces, I think it's not surprising that some of the interveners are asking whether this isn't a stacked deck.
Is this part of a bigger conversation we need to be having about the federal government having a view about pipelines and the importance of getting, Alberta energy to market, which is really the subtext here, and provinces blocking that.
Well, there's no question there should be a debate about that, but that's not how the process works right now. This isn't the NEB doesn't decide on where the best place to put a pipeline is. They react to react to a proposal by a single company to do something that it finds profitable, and then they say yes to it. And so there's really a question as to whether individual oil companies should have the right to override municipal powers. Yes, there are serious national questions about where we send our oil and when, but the federal government hasn't put a process in place to have that discussion.
All right, Gregory, we've got to leave it there. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks very much.